Hi, I'm Paul Stringfellow, CTO here at Gardner Systems. On April 26th, we've got a cybersecurity event coming up here in Liverpool, so do look out for an invite dropping in your inbox sometime soon. But before that event, what we wanted to do was try and give you a little bit of a taster of what we'll be covering. So what we're doing is recorded a couple of videos with our keynote speaker for the day, just to give you some insight into what we're talking about and the kind of things you can expect to take from the event. So in the first video, we talked about threat landscape and where the current threats lie and how organisations might be able to recognise them and help deal with them. In this second session, we're going to talk a little bit about some of the technologies that organisations can use to help address the current cybersecurity threat landscape. So joining me to do that is the guy who's going to be our keynote speaker on the day. It's Jon Hope from Sophos. Hi, Jon. How are you doing?
Really good, thank you. Yeah, you're okay?
Yeah, good. And thanks for joining us again. Keen-eyed amongst you will notice we're wearing exactly the same clothes and sat in exactly the same place, so we are just continuing to record. But if you do want to go back and find out a little bit about Jon's background and some of the current threat landscape, do go out and check the first video that we've recorded. So in this one, Jon, we want to talk a little bit about how organisations are using modern tools, modern approaches to deal with threat landscape. So maybe before we do that, if we rewind slightly, how have organisations been dealing with the security threat, and why are those tools increasingly becoming less effective for dealing with the problem?
So I'll turn that question around and we'll have a look at the second part first, if that's okay. So the cyber criminals have become really good at adapting their techniques. As we've got better at detecting threats and blocking the attacks that they're launching, they're becoming increasingly sophisticated. So often using legitimate tools and processes against us is a really common thing, but also creating new types of malware really quickly to try and evade detection. And traditionally, organisations maybe would have gone out and bought things like endpoint protection and firewalls to keep themselves secure. And one of the more recent technology innovations around the endpoint has been using techniques like machine learning and artificial intelligence to recognise when an attack has come in which is new and has never been seen before. So rather than relying on labs and research and having seen malware before, actually effectively in the field making smart decisions about what's likely to be malicious and blocking it. And that will get an organisation so far. With our product Intercept X, for example, we use three techniques, one of which is machine learning, in order to keep on top of the latest generation of threats. But we're finding that even that is not enough. Unfortunately, the cyber criminals, they are often using our own legitimate tools and processes against us. So we covered that at length in the first session, but essentially using tools like RDP, using tools like PowerShell, in a way that is malicious, but it becomes really hard for technologies to figure out whether it's a malicious act or whether it's a legitimate use of a legitimate service. And the problem is you can't block these tools because organisations want to be using those. So then the question is, well, how do I tell whether this is a legitimate execution versus something that's bad that's happening? And unfortunately, the only answer to that question right now is human beings. AI, artificial intelligence, is pretty smart and will get you so far, but it's not infallible, right? And human beings have this ability to contextualize and rationalize and work out whether something is out of character and out of kilter, and maybe look into it and investigate in more detail. So one of the techniques that organizations that are more cyber aware are starting to do is they're starting to embark on things like human-led threat hunting. So they're employing an expert, or ideally a team of experts, to start looking through the telemetry on their estate and then looking for telltale signs that maybe they're under attack or that an attack is imminent, and recognizing those signals. So one of the things we do at Sophos, as well as proactive cybersecurity, we also operate an incident response team. This is effectively the cyber fire brigade, if you will. So an unfortunate victim can call us up and we will help them work through the problem and exit that situation in the best possible state. And that gives us a really rich source of telemetry to see, well, how bad can an attack be and what were the precursory steps before that attack took place. And in around 85% of the attacks that we investigate with incident response, we actually see that there were signals there that tell us the organisation was about to get hit, and it's really unfortunate that maybe if they'd seen those signals and seen that telemetry and done something about it, then maybe they wouldn't have had quite a serious problem. But in the defence of organisations, a lot of people don't have the skills or maybe the resources to go out there and hire a team of threat analysts to go start looking through the telemetry. So this is where we present ourselves with a real problem, with the fact that we know we need human beings, but those human beings are in short supply. Having the right cyber skills, it's really difficult to find people, and as a result, it's very expensive. Like any commodity, of course, if it's a rarity, it's more expensive. So we leave organisations in this challenge of, we know we need expertise, but we don't know how to get to it, and we don't know how we can afford to do that.
So there's an awful lot in there. There's an awful lot to unpack. But a couple of things that kind of I took from that was, one was the description of how we are defending against those things. So, it's a mix of analytics, so machine learning, AI, and human beings to kind of double check. So almost, I guess, machine learning to do the heavy lifting, so to work through lots and lots of information, and then almost the human beings, once that's been filtered down, to kind of double check.
Yep.
But that sounds very much how a modern cyber criminal organisation might deal with it. We talked about this in kind of the first video, that these are businesses in themselves. They sound like the same kind of tools that they're using to deal with that.
Absolutely, yes, that's very much the case. So cyber criminals will use a lot of human expertise to actually launch attacks. So maybe pulling on code and technology from other cyber criminals, but then actually it's hands on keyboard, one versus the other. And the problem with that is, of course, a human being can very quickly say, oh, well, that technique, that vector got detected, so I'm going to try something else, and I'll try something else, and they'll keep working around the problem. And the only real way to stop that is, again, with another human being at the other end to actually recognise that and do something about it. And this is why technology doesn't always work in these sorts of scenarios.
And you also talked about the ability to spot, I guess, what's known as a zero-day threat. So things that we can't rely on already knowing the problem, because these problems are evolving and changing so quickly. And one of the phrases that I hear used quite a lot, and I'm sure our customers and attendees to the event have heard, is this idea of detection and response, threat detection and response, extended detection and response. What do those terms mean? How's that different from installing some antivirus software on my desktop?
Sure. Okay. So there's a couple of DRs that we need to know about. There's EDR, XDR, and MDR. So we'll talk about each one of those, and we'll talk about how they're different from pure play detection. So if you just bought endpoint protection and you switch it on, then that's going to do its job to an extent, and that will block a very high proportion of attacks. So that it's a good thing to have, and it's absolutely something that you should have. Where EDR and XDR come into play then is you're layering on top a bunch of tools that you can use to search. So you can ask it for information about events that might look suspicious, and ask it for correlation of potential cyber criminal techniques across the estate. EDR is really just interested in your endpoints and your servers. XDR will bring in telemetry from other places. So in the Sophos world, we only do XDR, but our XDR platform will ingest telemetry from not just Sophos endpoints and servers, but for example, our firewall and our mobile device management. So we're looking at the organization as a whole and looking how the cyber criminals may have started to move around the estate so that we can keep track of it. So it's essentially a bunch of tools that an organisation can use. The problem is it's a bunch of tools that needs a human being to drive it. So although we try to make our XDR as easy as it possibly can be, you still need to be skilled enough to know what to ask it, and then more importantly, I guess, once it tells you things, what do you do with that next, and how do you act on that? So XDR is a great resource there to make security teams inside organisations really slick and deal with these challenges. But it does somewhat rely on having a security team there. So this is where the other DR comes into play, and that's MDR. So MDR is managed detection and response. So what this is doing is layering our security operations center on top of an organisation's protection. So potentially looking at Sophos on the endpoint, Sophos on the servers, but maybe also having other security technologies in place as well. But in all cases, taking the telemetry from that estate and then using our human expertise to start looking through there and looking for these telltale signatures, using our expertise to be able to recognize if an organization is under attack, and then either telling the organization they should do something if there's somebody there to respond, or alternatively, the last part there, the detection and response element, is where we could potentially connect to an organisation and proactively kick the cyber criminals out, make the changes that we need to do to keep the organisation safe. So that works really well for organisations where they don't have any cyber expertise, or where the cyber expertise isn't 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Because the cyber criminals, they don't take time off, so they're going to hit you at weekends, evenings, bank holidays. Sometimes cyber criminals will intentionally target organisations during that time because they know that maybe there's nobody there monitoring the estate and looking at it. So in the situation where your workforce goes home, we stay on stream and we keep an eye out and protect an organisation proactively. So that helps an organisation to access this human-led threat hunting without actually having to go out there and find the cyber experts themselves, recruit them, keep them occupied, and keep them paid, because that's a real challenge. These skills are in such demand that people will often move for significantly higher salaries elsewhere, and it becomes a real challenge to retain those people. So we essentially take that HR headache out of the way. We find the people, we keep them occupied, we get the most out of them, and then that is disseminated down to all of our MDR customers, so everybody sort of benefits.
So, I mean, there's a couple of things again in there that are really interesting. I think that 24/7 thing is hugely important. Like you said, many businesses will have operational hours. We might work Monday to Friday, 9 to 5:30, but the cyber threat is 24/7. So we need to be able to deal with that.
Yes.
But I suppose the other thing that kind of caught my attention, and maybe just something for people considering whether they should come to an event like this. Obviously, you work for Sophos, so you've got some vested interest in Sophos as a company. Mm-hmm. So if somebody's listening to this or watching this video and is considering the event but thinks, oh, well, actually, I've just invested in a whole bunch of technologies out at my endpoints, mm-hmm. or whatever that might be, are they going to have to throw all that away again to take advantage of a service as you were describing?
Good question. Yeah, absolutely. So I'm very glad to say that our MDR service is somewhat all-encompassing. So as much as we'd love you to have Sophos on the endpoints and on the servers and all that sort of thing, that's not necessarily a prerequisite. We will take telemetry from a wide variety of different cybersecurity platforms and act in exactly the same way that I've just described. So if a potential customer has already invested in some other endpoint vendor, or they've got a firewall from somewhere else, or maybe a mixed estate, that's okay. As long as we've got the connectors that we need to integrate with that platform, we can take the telemetry from there, and they don't have to actually get rid of what they've got in place. An organisation might have a bunch of tools that they're really happy with, and that's fine. We'll certainly work alongside that and cooperate in that sort of scenario. It also helps organisations get the most return on investment out of their estate. So if they've gone and bought an expensive firewall from another vendor, if they're not doing all of that proactive threat hunting I've just talked about, looking through the logs, looking at the reports, all that sort of thing, then they're probably not getting the most value out of that platform. So having our MDR service to wrap around there is really unlocking the maximum return on investment. Especially at the moment, the economic climate is not great. There isn't really much of an appetite to start tearing away products. It's disruptive, it's expensive. We'd much rather have this idea of working with the human expertise that we've got, working with security technology that's already in place. So there's no need to rip and replace if that's not something the business wants to do.
See, that sounds ideal almost, that the ability to give you the 24/7 coverage, but actually that bit about to get more value from the investments you've already made, mm-hmm. That kind of thing sounds perfect. I'm sure for any CISO or head of IT who's making those kind of decisions, the idea they can protect that investment and get more from it sounds really attractive.
Absolutely, yeah, and they can get more out of their team as well. So, if you've got a security team or an IT team and they're spending so much time playing what I like to call alert whack-a-mole, looking at all these dashboards and getting distracted, if we take that challenge away from them, then they can be proactive in so many other areas. They could be rolling out a new CRM system. They could be doing even simple things like patching and doing audits to make sure their policies are in place. All these things get put on the back burner because security is there front and center. But like I said, if we take that challenge and that human-led threat hunting away from those people, they can be much more proactive. And there's so many instances where we drive real positive ROI by just taking that burden of cybersecurity away.
Well, John, this has been great. Appreciate your time. Coming up to Liverpool ahead of the event to talk to us about some of the things that we're going to be covering. So if you've listened to this and are keen to find out more about the current threat landscape, the challenges that your business will be facing today, tomorrow, and in the future, then do come and join us on the 26th of April. We'll be covering that alongside some of the modern techniques for dealing with that problem. So until 26th of April, John, been great to see you. Thanks for coming up, and look forward to seeing you again at the event.
Likewise, looking forward to it.